Today is Tuesday, June 25th, 2024. This is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearings. We have 6 cases on the agenda. The first case we're going to start with is RPC 24003-001 at 108 South Courthouse Road. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about the property, sir.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board, county reps, good morning. This is the Meyerton Apartments. It's a 74-unit property built in 1940 and located in the Penrose neighborhood. The issues on appeal are the operating expenses and the cap rate. For the operating expenses, this property reported $602,000 in operating expenses in 2023. This is $8,100 per unit and equates to 39% of gross effective income. Now, if you'd kindly direct your attention to page 42 of the appeal, you'll see the 4-year operating history clearly laid out, as well as the current assessment. For this property, the owner made an accounting change in 2021 and 2022 that affected operating expenses. For 2021 and again in 2022, the owner appears to have netted utility income with utility expenses. So instead of reporting, for instance, water income and water expenses separately, the owner reported the net figure as an expense. This is why operating expenses decreased so much in 2021 and 2022, going from $555,000 in 2020 down to just $500,000 the following year. For 2020 and then again in 2023, however, the owner reported utility income and expenses separately. This is why, after seeing the 10% drop in expenses for 21 and 22, we see expenses increase in 23. Knowing that this is what caused expenses to decrease precipitously in 21 and 22, then to increase in 23, we can look to 2020 as a year of comparison for the 2023 expenses. Doing this, we see in 2020 and 2023 expenses were both years were the exact same amount as a percentage of gross effective income. Both in 2020 and 2023 expenses were 39% of gross effective income. This figure, 39% of GEI, is also in line with what we see at other properties in the submarket. The 2023 expenses, while the same as a percent of GEI, are 8% higher than the expenses reported in 2020. This is also in line with what would be expected given natural growth in expenses over the course of 4 years. Knowing this, we request that the 2023 operating expenses be considered for the assessment. As the county test grows income, it should also grow the 2023 expenses. Now for the cap rate, the county assumes a cap rate of 6.3% for this property. The county has stated they relied on 2 surveys to derive their cap rates this year, PwC and RERC. Now, looking at these surveys each in turn, we see that PwC is not the appropriate survey to use for this property because PwC is a survey of institutional investors regarding institutional grade properties. Now, institutional grade real estate is Class A or Class A plus property that generally has minimal risk of deteriorating or becoming obsolete during the investment holding period because the properties are brand new, they have state-of-the-art systems, and they have the best amenities. Institutional real estate is leased to regional or national credit tenants with above average store sales or gross business revenues. So this is just giving you an idea of what the PwC survey is capturing, that again, it's Class A plus, that are the newest, brand new, have state-of-the-art systems and best amenities. The subject property, again, built in 1940, severely lacking in amenities, not in the best location. These institutional grade properties will, again, have the newest buildings in the best markets, likely have metro access, and are typically high-rise buildings. So examples would be the J-Sol Apartments in Ballston or the Sage Apartments in National Landing. Again, this property is 1940. It's in Penrose. It's not near a metro. If you've been there, it's got limited access. If you travel one way out of the property, it takes you straight to 50 with no through street. It runs into Fort Myer base there. So PwC doesn't even provide an adjustment to evaluate non-institutional grade apartments such as the subject. PwC does give an adjustment to value the discount rate for non-institutional grade properties. That adjustment, to give you some idea of where the cap rate would need to be adjusted if you look at PwC, is 300 basis points. So PwC, not an appropriate survey to use for looking at the subject property. So now we turn our attention to RERC. RERC has 3 tiers of cap rates. The third tier apartments are defined as older properties with functional inadequacies and or in marginal locations. All of this applies to the subject. This range on the RERC survey for cap rates is 6.53% to 10.33%, with an average of 8.73%. Now, even if we classify this 1940 property as a second tier property, defined as aging former first tier properties in good to average locations, the RERC survey range is still higher, much higher than the county's cap rates. That range for second tier properties is 7.03 to 10.03%, with an average of 8.4%. Again, the county on this property is at 6.3%. So the low end of the RERC survey the county relied on shows a cap rate for third tier properties such as a subject of 6.53%, while the assessment's only at 6.3%. We imputed a cap rate of 6.5% for this property, which again is below the low end of that range. It's very conservative. It essentially values this property as better than the best third tier properties on the East region. The county's cap rate that has been imputed 6.3% is more indicative of a first tier property from the RERC survey. First tier properties are defined as best in class. They're your brand new properties. Even then, the county's cap rate values this property as an above average first tier property. Again, this is a 1940 construction in Penrose with functional inadequacies. It is certainly not in the top half of first tier properties along the East Coast. So in summary, the owner did switch accounting methodology for 21 and 22. This is why you see operating expenses decrease so largely from 2020 to 2021. They decreased again from 21 to 22. Then with the accounting change in 23, expenses went back up. However, they were in line with 2020. They were the exact same percent as 2020 as a percent of gross effective income, both at 39%. This is also in line with natural growth we would expect to see over 4 years at the property. It was 8% higher in 2023 than it was in 2020. Finally, the RERC survey shows a low-end cap rate for properties such as the subject of 6.53%. We've imputed a cap rate of 6.5%. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Shuttlesworth for the county, please.
Yes, good morning, everyone. This was not an easy case, I have to admit, and I will do my best to walk the board members through the summary sheet. This is a garden-style property. It was built in 1947, and it has effective age of 1980. The biggest issue with this case were material fluctuations in the reported operating expenses over the past 4 years, so much so it was extremely difficult to establish how these expenses were trending. According to the appellant, the OPEX reported in 2021 and 2022 were unusually low, and they were anomaly. And these are columns C and D. So essentially, out of 4 years reported, we had 2 years that were under question. We added 1 more year to obtain more history, which is column A. The reported admin expenses of $278,492 for 2020, column B, were an outlier. If we look at this expense category across the 5-year history, we are able to see that this number reported in 2020 was abnormally high. Then when we look at the 2022 reported utilities of $21,351 and compare them to the other years, they were unusually low, so we have another outlier. I added column B1 to show stabilized admin expenses, and I added column D1 to show stabilized utility expenses. Now, when we look at the operating expenses across all the years, we can see more stabilized trend. Looking at the 2023 INE, you can see a big jump in maintenance and repairs, and larger portion of this is due to an increase in payroll, which is cost necessary to maintain the property. In reconstructed column F1, however, we did exclude replacement of appliances and carpet. Our cap rates in 2024 commercial guidelines are expressed in ranges, not as one number, just as we can see them in commercial real estate publications. Our unloaded cap rates range for garden style property range between 4.74% and 5.49%, and loaded cap rates range between 5.75% to 6.5%. We applied 6.3% cap rate. And PwC third quarter of 2023 for the Mid-Atlantic region provides the cap rate range of 4.25% to 6.5%. And for the National Market Review, they stated cap rate ranges from 3.75% to 8%. And there are two sales that we keep hearing about, and probably we will keep here throughout the rest of the summer, which is the Falls Church Crescent, which closed in February 2024, and Jasper Columbia Pike, which closed in July 2023. The 2024 sale will be considered for 2025 analysis. We also found out that the cap rate for Jasper Columbia Pike was 5.5%. The same seller, Avalon Bay Communities, also sold one of their property, another property from their portfolio in November of 2022, and that sale produced the cap rate of 4.5%, and that was Avalon Park Crest. So that is it. I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, this first question is for the county. On the summary sheet, where the owner supplies expenses and income, under E16, which is expenses, it has here in the county's form decorating, parentheses, painting, carpet, etc. So that's
16.
Yeah, so that's it looks to me like replacing carpet is a normal expense and shouldn't be excluded. Am I wrong?
So if we're talking unit per unit basis, this would be regular turnover expense. When we have a bulk of cost for just carpet replacement, and in this case, the amount was $9,576. This is more than one unit, and that's why we excluded it.
But even if it's 5 units, I mean, why is that not an expense?
Well, again, if it's unit by unit, we don't know how many units were turnover. We were provided the whole list of decorating expenses, and they all added up to $64,600 and 28,000. So we excluded 28,000 altogether.
Let me ask the applicant. It says also exclude new appliances. What you may or may not know how your client does this, but I mean, are these like a unit turns over and we realize the stove's broken? Is that what that is, or is that like a mass replacement?
So this owner, we were asked this question on several of this owner's properties this year. The response on all of them was they replace them as they break. So as a microwave broke, they get a new microwave. As a stove breaks, they replace the stove. So it's, I'm not sure if it's on turn or with the resident in the unit, but it is as they wear out, they replace them. So it's not.
Okay. That's my questions. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Maskin.
For the department, you had mentioned, I think it was RERC's study, similar garden apartment style projects, that the range of cap was something like 3.8 to 6.5. Is that right?
That was PWC.
Okay, great. And the highest cap rate, the riskiest type of this product is 6.5. What geography was that for, Mid-Atlantic states?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, do you follow on directly? Does the department, is 6.3 cap rate the highest garden apartment cap rate applied to any such property in the county?
No, the highest would be 6.5 loaded, yes. The highest, so the range is from 5.75 to 6.5% for garden style apartments in the county.
What does a project have to be in order to get that highest cap rate?
So we have it broken down into the effective age. We have different tiers of the effective age.
Yeah.
So the subject will have to have the effective age of, I believe, 1970.
75 or early, that's what you have for other projects. That's what it's all about, effective age. Thanks a lot.
Mhm.
Mr. Matskin, if I might just quickly interject, the cap rates in the surveys are unloaded. So the tax rate needs to be added to them. So when the county is referring to their cap rates, you need to add at least 100 basis points to them to compare apples to apples. So
Okay,
if
Thank
they're
you.
saying 4, thank you.
thanks. Does the department agree with that?
Yes, so
Okay,
that's why I
thanks a lot.
provided ranges for both, for loaded and unloaded cap
Yeah,
rates.
we're dealing with unloaded here for NOI. Thanks a lot.
Okay, any other questions? No, Ms. Shuttlesworth, if you take a minute to wrap up then?
Yeah, so again, this was a difficult case. I did the best I could to stabilize the admin expenses reported for 2020 and the utility expenses reported for 2022. We reconstructed the 2023 I&E. The OPEX ratio has been trending between 31 and 72% and 37.5%. We use 36.5% OPEX ratio in our column G. The appellants copied the figures from the 2023 I&E and they just pasted it into the 2024 pro forma, disregarding changes in potential rents, and applied OPEX ratio of over 39%. The assessment increased by 2.22%. The 2024 assessment per unit is less than 210,000 per unit. And I asked the board to confirm the subject's assessment at $15,447,300. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir?
Yes, thank you. So I think we found the issue with their cap rates here. PWC is being used to value this 1940 Class B property. PWC, again, is institutional grade real estate, brand new, state-of-the-art systems, best amenities. That is not this property. You can't use PWC to value this property. We also heard the Jasper sell at a 5.5% cap rate. That's unloaded. Add the tax rate to that, you're over a 6.5. The Jasper's also not a comparable. It's a 2009 build in a better location, much larger property. So if we go to the appropriate space for cap rates, we go to RERC tier 2 and tier 3, we see that cap rates are much higher than what the county's imputed. As for the county stating we submitted a 2024 pro forma, there was no pro forma submitted. We claimed the 2023 actual income and expenses per Virginia law. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. All right, it's just among the board members. Where are folks on this? Mr. Mendez. Can you turn your microphone on?
Yeah, I thought the county's expenses were a little bit high. What I did was I used the reconstructed column and I applied the cap rate, and they came up with somewhere between it was 15,175,000 to 100 is what I got. So that's where I am.
All right, other folks? Mr. Lawson.
Yes, I that was one of my calculations, Jotty. I also took the actual, the 927,324, and applied the county cap rate. I got 14,719,400. We've had discussions in the past about when is it a capital investment vis-a-vis when is it ordinary maintenance? And I think, Madam Chairman, and you can correct me if my recollection's wrong, that if it's done case by case, we let it go as expenses. If it's a mass investment of capital, such that it would change the year that the county would apply the cap rate to, then that is a capital investment. And so, I think that these expenses should not have been excluded. So that's what I'll share.
Okay. Mr. Penaranda, you had your hand up? Turn your microphone on. Thank you.
Yes, I agree with both statements, and I originally did the same calculation as Mr. Mendez did. I came up with the same number. But one of the things that caught my attention also was what Mr. Lawson said as far as the expenses that were excluded. I think the appliances is probably justifiable to exclude because that amount seems to be for a bulk of appliances for more than just a few units. But as far as the carpeting, I mean, it's $9,500. I don't think that's really an expense that is going to, change the carpet in either the hallways or it's, to me, it's more than just maybe a couple units or 2-3 units, because it takes, carpeting is not cheap anymore.
Mhm.
So I just added that back as an expense at 9,500. And I came up with a little bit lower than the amount that Mr. Mendez came by adding, because that would give me an NOI of 583,084. And the final value that I came up is 15,023,100.
Okay. Mr. Mendez, or sorry, Mr. Matskin, you had your hand up?
I did. I can go with any of the suggestions. I think the last one, they all made sense to me. I think the last one makes the most sense, most easily definable and discernible.
Okay. Mr. Yates, do you agree with that, or?
I agree with that.
All right, I think we've got a consensus. All right, Mr. Penaranda, would you like to make a motion then?
Sure, I'll move that we reduce the assessment to 15,023,100. And that's by using the reconstructed numbers from the county and adding the extra expense of carpeting that was excluded.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do I have a second? Mr. Mendez, all in favor? Aye,
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Okay. It is unanimous. The assessment is reduced to 15,023,100. And that's based on the reconstructed numbers for expenses, adding the carpeting back in. Thank you. Okay, next case on the agenda are the same owner and assessor, the RPC Economic Unit 3200605A at 2920 Columbia Pike. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes on this property, sir.
Yes, thank you. So this is the Jasper Columbia Pike. This property sold on July 24th of 2023 for $105 million. Now, first, I just want to correct a couple of typos in the county's presentation. This property did sell again July 24th of 2023. I believe the staff report says 2024. It did occur in 2023. It was also built in 2009, not 2007, as the report states. Now, as I mentioned, this property did sell in July of last year for $105 million. Article 10, Section 2 of the Virginia Constitution states that all assessments of real estate shall be at their fair market value to be ascertained as prescribed by law. Virginia law defines fair market value as the price a property will bring when offered for sale by a seller who desires but is not obliged to sell and bought by a buyer under no necessity of purchasing. In this case, the seller was willing. We've heard from the county confirm this fact previously, and the buyer was under no necessity of purchasing. The buyer was also willing. On page 108 of the county submission, you can see the details of the sale as stated by the seller's broker. The marketing of the property was launched in January of 2023, so about 7 months from start to finish. Teasers were sent to more than 10,000 qualified investors. More than 250 of these investors signed confidentiality agreements. 20 investor groups toured the property, and ultimately 12 to 15 bids were received, and Penzance, the current owner, won the deal with a combination of competitive pricing and internal funds, as you can see on that page 108. By all accounts, this was a fair market, arm's length transaction that meets the definition of fair market value under Virginia law. As such, the sale price should be applied to the assessment. Now, nothing has changed at this property from the date of sale to the date of value. If anything, capital markets remained poor, and that was unexpected. So if anything, the sale price overstates the January 1 date of value. However, we're not going to adjust for that. We're going with the fair market arm's length sale price, $105 million. Now, this sale and the prior year's assessment 2023 and the current year assessment 2024, this is a great example of how the county's guidelines are broken and not capable of capturing the true fair market value of properties as required by law. So the 2023 assessment was just under $118 million, which means an ASR of 112%. Then after the property sold for $105 million in July of last year, the county guidelines actually increased the assessment in 2024 to just over $118 million, a difference of over $13 million. The 2024 assessment, which was created using the guidelines, was 12.5% greater than the sales price. Then upon appeal and given the chance to adjust the assumptions used by the assessment, the county was only able to get the value down to $112 million within the current guidelines. Now think about that for a minute. Even with the details of the sale, the data provided to the county on appeal regarding the sale, the best the county could do within the existing guidelines is still over $7 million above that sale price. I mean, to put it simply, the county guidelines cannot get to the sale price without adjusting the cap rate. Now, if you look at the county's combined NOI for this property and divide that into the sale price to get a cap rate, we see that the county's cap rate needs to be increased by 35 basis points, and that's even accepting the county's income and expense assumptions. This adjustment is also in line with the result of the county's own stated cap rate method in the guidelines. That method also suggests a 30 basis point increase. This analysis is shown beginning on page 38 of the board book. Now, we've heard several times now the county state that they haven't put it in writing, they haven't said who they heard it from, but they heard the sale cap rate was a 5.5%. This is a unloaded cap rate. Once you load it with the tax rate, this property does have some retail, so it becomes over 6.5% once loaded. Now, how do we know that 5.5% that's been asserted by the county is unloaded? Well, first off, that is the way market participants speak in unloaded cap rates. We also heard from a market participant that the sale cap rate was an unloaded 5.5, which again, once loaded, goes to over 6.5%. Secondly, the county contends that if the county contends that it's an unloaded cap rate at 5.5, we can get to an implied NOI based on the sale price. What you do is you multiply 0.055, 5.5% by the sale price, $105 million, and you get an NOI, an implied sale NOI. Looking at this and comparing it to what the property reported in 2022, the implied NOI is 10% lower than what was reported in 2022. That doesn't make sense. This is a 2009 property. It's stabilized. Why would any potential purchaser impute NOI that's 10% lower than what the property's reported? Well, they didn't. The answer is that's an unloaded cap rate. Once you load it, you get to a more appropriate NOI. So whichever way you want to look at the sale cap rate, the conclusion is the same. The county's guideline rates are too low. Now, knowing the current guidelines cannot accurately assess the subject, and instead of adjusting the cap rate, the county appears to contest the sale based on a press release by the seller stating that the seller had entered into a mezzanine loan commitment of up to $21 million. This is included on page 82 of the county submission. You can see on the same page 82, the seller had sold another 2 properties for $237 million just before selling this one. You can also see on page 82 that the seller had an additional $3.7 billion, that's billion with a B, in available funds. So the county's claim that a mezzanine loan of up to $21 million necessitated a fire sale of this property, simply not supported by any of the facts. The seller had $3.7 billion in available funds at the time. Now, finally, when I was reviewing this case, I couldn't help but think of a theory called Occam's razor. Now, if you're not familiar, Occam's razor is a problem-solving principle that essentially states when given multiple explanations for something, the simplest explanation is often the best. Here we're presented with 2 explanations for why the assessment cannot get to the sale price within the current county guidelines. First, the first explanation, the guidelines cannot get to the sale price because the cap rates are too low. Simple. Alternatively, we have the county's theory that the seller, despite having $3.7 billion available, despite having sold 2 other properties for $237 million, despite having marketed this property for over 7 months through a professional brokerage and having received 12 to 15 bids, the seller was somehow under duress to sell and so sold at a discount that all 12 bidders colluded to undercut the market value. I think the answer is clear. This was a valid, fair market sale, and the county's cap rates are too low. How much too low? At least 70 basis points based on the county's stated sale cap rate. This is also what the surveys tell us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Shuttlesworth for the county, please.
Yes, so the property is a mixed-use multifamily building built in 2007 and the same effective age according to our records. It also features 35,105 square foot of retail space, and the property was inspected in June 2023. The 2023 INEs for the excuse me? The 2023 INE for the apartment and for the retail components represent partial year from July 24, 2023 through December 31st, 2023. And the property was sold in July 2023 for $105 million. The prior years reported, 2020 through 2022, show the actual retail numbers. Our projected 2024 apartment income and effective gross income are actually lower than the numbers reported in the appellant's pro forma. Just a quick note here, the OPEX reported for years 2020 through 2022 are cumulative for both apartment and for the retails, as we have been receiving 1 combined INEs for these years. The highest cumulative OPEX, again, for both retail and residential component reported between 2020 and 2022 was $2.125 million. In the apartment pro forma, the appellants are projecting over $2.4 million. They projected OPEX for both retail and for the apartment is over $2.6 million. This is nowhere near to the OPEX the property experienced in the prior years. For the retail, the property again has 35,105 square feet of net leasable area. However, 8,112 square feet of that amount is being occupied by Arlington Free Clinic. No rent is being generated from this space, and the lease does not expire until January 2029. In our revision column F1, we excluded this space, and we accounted for only 26,993 square feet, which does generate the income. Essentially, our projected rental income for retail space is below the retail rent projected by the appellants. The same goes for our projected EGI and NOI. According to the listing broker of Jasper, and his email communication provided to Drea, the subject was advertised from January 2023. They received between 12 and 15 bids during the process. Penzacna won the bid due to a combination of competitive pricing and having the internal funds. We did consider this sale. We did not exclude it from our analysis, but we also consider other factors, but this one sale in our 2024 analysis. Again, our cap rates in 2024 commercial guidelines are expressed in ranges. Our unloaded cap rates ranges are 4.24% to 5.9% for the mid-rise and high-rise apartments. And loaded cap rates range between 5.25 and 6.10%. In this case, we applied the cap rate of 5.6% for the apartment, which we have learned is above the cap rate that was produced by the recent sale. Again, Jasper was one comparable used by several appellants this year. The members will have a chance to see more cases filed by Avalon Bay Communities, who was the seller of this property. They are disclosing in each one of the BOE review applications the cap rate of Jasper. And again, Avalon Bay Communities, the same seller, sold another property in November 2022, Avalon Park Crest, and this cap rate was 4.5%. And that is it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? Mr. Mendez.
For the county, in the revision in column F compared to the appellant's column G, there's $400,000 less in expenses. Where does that come from? Because I guess you guys have $2 million.
Yes, so it's broken into apartment and retail component. So you can see, I'm sorry, you said column F or column G?
So for the county's column F, they have
okay.
$400,000 less in expenses than the appellant's column G.
Yeah, so this is exactly what I was talking about. They are projecting 2.4 million just for the apartments, and I don't know how
We
they
amortize 2023's partial year financials since that's all we had access
if you
to.
look if you look at the expenses, how they were trending, and these are cumulative expenses for both retail and commercial. They were nowhere near $2.4 million. So yeah, we have questions. I really encourage board members to pay attention to the OPEX they are projecting for apartment and for the retail.
That operating expenses is what the current owner incurred in the time of ownership. We just grew that for a full 12 months and then grew that by 3% for inflation.
I just
That's
wanted
all
to
it
add,
is.
if I could add something. If that projected OPEX in the pro forma was in line with numbers reported for 2020 through 2022, we would come up with value that is higher than the sales price. I just wanted to point that out.
Without adjusting cap rates, which is the crux of the issue.
All right. Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, for the county, my first question, on page 9, where you have the income expense summary, in the comments, there's a comment, the copy of recent appraisal was requested, but it was not provided. What?
Yes.
What? Is there a specific appraisal you wanted?
Just the third-party appraisal performed by the state licensed appraiser. This is not an unusual request. Every time we have a recent sale and there is an appeal, we request for the copy. And it's not just to see what the cap rate was stated in those appraisals. It's also to verify other property features, the square footage.
What appraisal are you talking about? One that the purchaser obtained for financing?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Let me ask the owner a quick question. The purchaser was Penzance?
That's correct, yes.
And they had sufficient cash to secure a loan in today's marketplace, which is going to be a low percentage of the ultimate value. Is that correct?
So they did not require an appraisal. The owner did not get an appraisal. And on the CoStar listing, it does say that they secured $65 million in financing for it. So I
So
assume they had
65
sufficient.
is what percent of the sales price? About 60%?
62, yeah, 62%.
Okay. That's my questions, Madam Chairman.
Any other questions? No? All right, Ms. Shuttlesworth, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Okay, so again, we had several factors to consider in this case. Number one, the sale price. Number two, the cap rate that was disclosed by the seller of Jasper. Number three, the 2022 through 2022 I&Es show combined expenses for both retail and residential components. And they also show the actual retail figures, and they show retail figures, actual retail figures. The appellants are proposing the value that is below 2023 sales price. They projected cumulative operating expenses are over 2.6 million. Looking at the historical numbers, 2.6 million is clearly out of line. Here's the interesting point that I just mentioned, that if we applied more reasonable OPEX that is in line with prior years, the value that would come out would be higher than sales price of Jasper. Even if we applied a proposed cap rate of 5.8% for the apartments and 7. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you. I think we're missing the forest for the trees here. This property sold in an arm's length transaction July of 23 for $105 million. Regardless of how the county tries to get there, regardless of what we project to get there, that is the value under Virginia law. Article 10, Section 2 of the Virginia Constitution states all real estate shall be assessed at fair market value. The Supreme Court has gone on to define fair market value as the price a property will bring when offered for sale by a seller who desires but is not obliged to sell, and bought by a buyer under no necessity of purchasing. Those are the parameters that were present in this sale. The county has not proposed any alternative as to why this is not a good sale. It was professionally marketed, 12 to 15 bidders. They chose the best bid. This is a valid fair market sale, and it fits the definition under Virginia law. The county's assessment cannot get there under the current guideline cap rates. That's the adjustment that's needed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. All right, it's just among the board members. Mr. Matzkin.
I'm routinely careful to not accept a trend line with one or not more than two data points. But in this case, there is only one data point, only one real sale that fits the bill within the time period with a similar property, and it's the appellant's property. And although I find no real problem with the I&E that the department has come up with, I nonetheless, based on arguments this year and more particularly last year, want to go with the fair market value assessment of this in this case. And therefore I'm finding on behalf of the appellant.
Hey,
All right, Mr. Yates.
Ken, are you saying the 105 or are you saying the number that the appellant came up with on their analysis?
Sales price,
Okay, I agree.
which is almost the same.
Okay. Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, I also agree with Mr. Matzkin, and and I think this points out, and the reason I asked the question to the owner is, your pool of purchasers is just so small, given that lenders require such a huge cash capital investment in any kind of a sale of this nature. So I also agree we should go with the sales price.
Yeah, and in this case, I mean, there was multiple bids too. So, I mean, I would agree. All right, Mr. Panorama, anything different?
No, I agree. I think most of the time we see, sales price that is low and we think, oh, they got a good deal or there were other circumstances. But I think, having, like you said, multiple bids and different buyers for this year, I think the sales price is justifiable.
Okay. We operate on motion. Would somebody like to make a motion? Ken? Mr. Metzger?
I move that we reduce the sales price, and if I can read it, I'm sorry, the assessment price to $105 million even,
Based on the sale.
based on the sale in the assessment period.
Okay, and Mr. Yates, a second? Okay, all in favor? Aye, opposed? Okay, it is unanimous. The assessment is reduced to the sales price of 105 million. Thank you. Okay, I believe I saw Mr. Hoffman.
I am here.
Okay,
You see
there we
me?
go. I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure you were in at the beginning, okay?
Yeah, I didn't want to be on screen for that case if I wasn't part of it. So
Okay, no problem. Thank you. All right, next case on the agenda is Economic Unit 1602102A at 1001 Wilson Boulevard. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes on this property, sir.
Yes, thank you. This is the London Normandy House Apartments located at the far end of Roslyn. This property consists of 196 units and was built in 1965. The issues on appeal are the vacancy rate and the cap rate. Looking at the operating history on the county's test page, we see that vacancy, collection, rent loss, and concessions have averaged over 10% over the past 4 years. These items, vacancy, collection, rent loss, concessions, was over 9% in 2020, 16% in 2021, over 8% in 2022, and nearly 7% in 2023. On average, again, 10% over the past 4 years. Now, we did inspect this property last summer, and it's clear why vacancy, concessions, rent loss is so high. This property is seriously dated. It has original windows, original floors. It has limited amenities. The location, it's in Roslyn, yes, but it's also marginal. It's technically in Roslyn, but it's at the far end. If you're familiar with this block, it doesn't really feel like it's a part of Roslyn. It's kind of a ghost town. There's a lot of vacant buildings. It's actually built up above grade level, so you have to climb some stairs to get there. It's a little bit of a different, it's a submarket within the submarket, if you will. Now, seeing the property, you can tell it's not competitive with other market rate properties in the market. It does have a pool. However, this pool is on the ground floor, which has limited sunlight due to all the tall buildings around. The pool's also only open on weekends and holidays. The gym is also very small. It's on the penthouse. It's not accessible from the elevators. You actually have to leave the elevators, go up a set of stairs, step over a threshold, and that's how you access the gym. As I said, the units themselves are also very dated. Original windows from 1965, original floors from 1965. I was looking through photos from our inspection last year. The thermostat is one of those old-timey ones that I don't know if you can, I don't know where you'd go to find those anymore. Appliances, very old. Counters, also very old. Given all of these issues, it makes sense that vacancy, collection, rent loss has been where it has been over the past 4 years. Now, knowing these issues, again, averaging over 10% the past 4 years, the counties assume both the standard vacancy loss rate and the guideline cap rate. Essentially, the assessment treats this property as if it has no vacancy and collection loss issue. This risk is not captured anywhere in the assessment, not by the vacancy and collection loss rate, nor by the cap rate. This is not how the market would value this property and results in an assessment that is above fair market value. Here again, for the cap rates, we're relying on these 2 surveys that the county told us they used to develop their cap rates. PwC, again, this is not appropriate for this property. This is for institutional grade properties. Institutional grade real estate is Class A or Class A plus property that generally has minimal risk of deteriorating or becoming obsolete during the investment holding period. Because the properties are brand new, the properties have state-of-the-art systems. the properties have the best amenities. So PwC coming in at unloaded 4.5% cap rate. Once you account for the tax rate, that's 5.53%. That's for institutional grade properties. That's for the properties another block or two over in Roslyn that have just been constructed. That is not for this 1965 property that's, very dated in a very marginal location within Roslyn. So we look at RERC, which the county says is the other survey they relied on. We see the cap rate range for second tier properties is 6.53% to 10.33%, with an average of 8.73%. We've imputed a cap rate of only 5.85% on the appeal. This is 70 basis points lower than the low end of this range. Now, looking at the review in this case, we probably should have imputed a much higher cap rate, but based on this cap rate, we based our cap rate based on the Jasper sale comp, which said the guidelines were off by 20 basis points. Looking at the RERC survey, we should have increased it by 70 basis points. Now, as it stands, the county's cap rate is below the range of the second tier cap rates from RERC as well. That range is 7.03% to 10.03%, with an average of 8.4%. The county's cap rate is actually reflective of a first tier property. RERC defines first tier properties as new or newer quality construction in prime to good locations. And even then, the county's cap rate is at the low end of the first tier range. This property is most certainly not a new or newer quality construction in a prime location. It was built in 1965 and still has many of the original features, original windows, original floors. Thermostat, I can't tell if it's original, but it may well be. An adjustment to the cap rate is especially warranted for this property, given the risk with the income stream over the past 4 years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Shuttlesworth for the county, please.
Yes, so London and Normandy House apartments are located in Roslyn neighborhoods and 3 blocks away from the Roslyn metro station. The property was built in 1965. We actually decreased the effective age on the last year's review based on the interior and exterior inspection. So the property is dated, and we acknowledged that last year. Again, the issue is the cap rate, OPEX, and vacancy. Looking at the summary sheet, there is no doubt that 2021 was not a good year for the subject. Almost 9% decline in the apartment rent. Vacancies and collections went up over 16%, and the NOI declined by almost 17%. For the past 2 years, however, we saw increase in the potential rent and declining vacancies. The 2023 INE shows almost 8% increase in the apartment rent, and the vacancies and collections went down to 6.7%. The 2023 NOI reported increase of 4.57%. The board members can probably see that the other income reported in 2023 declined by over 51%. There are also large variances in reported utilities, maintenance, and repairs, as well as the insurance and taxes. I did reach out to Mr. Harmon trying to get some more insight, and I was advised that these variances were triggered by the change in the appellant's accounting software, and that the utility reimbursements were reclassified. So they were actually offset against the expenses. That's why the utility expenses went down so drastically. Now, moving on to the revision column F, based on the rental information provided, we projected 0.38% increase in the potential rent. Again, the property potential rent in 23 increased by 7.81%. We applied a stabilized vacancy of 6%. We can see the subject's vacancy has been trending down, and it was noted, it was recorded at 6.7% for 2023. In our revision column F, we also increased the OPEX from 39% to 40%, which is higher than OPEX projected by the appellants in the pro forma. Our projected NOI increases by less than 1%. And again, the property's NOI for 2023 increased by 4.57%. Our metro cap rate for high-rise apartment with the effective age of 1975 is 5.65%. Our cap rates in 2024 commercial guidelines are expressed in ranges, depending on the proximity to the closest metro station, type of the property, and the effective age. So again, it's not a one number. Our unloaded cap rate for the high-rise apartments are 4.24% to 5.9%, and our loaded cap rates are from 5.25% to 6.1%. PwC third quarter of 2023 for the Mid-Atlantic region provides the cap rate range of 4.25% to 6.5%. These ranges are wide. We are dealing with the apartments that have different locations, closer or further away from the major commuting, shopping, and employment centers, and different effective ages. These publications do not break down the cap rates down to these categories. And Arlington County is not at the high end of range when it comes down to the cap rates in the Mid-Atlantic region. It's quite to the contrary. That is it. I'm open for questions.
Just wanted to briefly add too that this is literally within, it's like a half a block from Roslyn Metro Station. So we would obviously disagree with the idea that's not in a good location. Two, it's a 4-star property out of 5 stars. This is per CoStar, which we also noted as listing the property as under renovations. And then lastly, we provided this as a visual aid, and we'll provide it in the future cases, but we want to make sure that when the agents are speaking about these numbers, that they're also using the same numbers we are, in the sense that we're only privy to third quarter surveys, right? We've gone over this a number of times. We believe that they're quoting from fourth quarter or second half surveys, which would have come out after the date of valuation. So if there's a reason why their information is different from ours, we'd love to know why. We've quoted these surveys, we've listed them, and we'll have them available in the books going forward. Thank you.
Okay. Questions from board members? Mr. Matzkin.
I wasn't sure until I heard Mr. Cheekas who to direct this to. Now I know I ought to direct it to the department. You'd said, Mr. Cheekas, you said that just now that they're in process of renovating this, and I assume it's twin building at the other end of the block. Did I hear that right? This leads to a fundamental question.
Yeah, we were just going to verify, what kind of description CoStar gave it and noted at that time it was listed as under renovations.
It's under renovation.
If I may, Mr. Matzkin, we inspected this and there were no renovations projected at the time of inspection. So I'm not sure. We see this often. CoStar just says this, but it's not accurate. So I don't know.
Great. Yeah, I've dealt with CoStar a lot. That's both of you have credibility here. The reason I ask is that for at least 10 years, this block has been discussed seriously by serious people as being demolished and renovated. And in fact, the commercial property in between these two apartment buildings has for many years had kick-out clauses on leases, and always extending it, but they'll only write 1.5-year leases, or if they're longer, that the landlord has the right to ask people to leave after a year, 1.5, 2 years, regardless of how long their lease is. Does anybody know if that, so first, I'm guessing, because nobody's brought it up, that there is no site plan for this block yet, right? Everybody agree with that? There's no, we're just going along, okay? I was thinking, nonetheless, that if who's going to move in there for more than a year if the block is constantly under promise of being demolished, and nobody long-term would be there. But I'm not seeing that in the rents. I'm not seeing it in increased vacancies. I just wanted to bring this out because this is such a famous block for that, always under but I guess there isn't one. That's my conclusion. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
I can address that somewhat, Mr. Matzkin. So this area will, if it ever is developed in the future, within the next 10, 20 years, it will be done in phases. And this building is not part of the first sort of where the phase would be. It would be where the offices are that have been closed down.
Yeah, at
I hope
least-
that's helpful.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know that I want to
Okay.
move into a
right.
place long-term where there's huge construction, but thanks.
Right, other questions? Mr. Hoffman?
I got two questions for the county. One is, I'm trying to remember, is this property on a ground lease? And is there any thought behind cap rates on ground lease properties versus non? And then the second question would be for the county as well. And like, what are the features that differentiate between a 1965 effective age building and a 1975 effective building?
So the first question I'll have to defer to Chris. Chris?
Yeah, I do not believe so. I don't see any record of that in CoStar as far as if that was a fee simple transaction or just a ground lease. No, we don't look into that as far as capitalizing a separate ground lease income stream. I think the board has mentioned that as well as far as looking into that. A little bit of our purview as far as mass appraisal, and we're looking at fee simple value. We don't kind of get into who owns what portion and to what taxation should they be owed. And I apologize, the second part?
So what are the features that distinguish this as a 1975 effective age building as opposed to a 1965?
So I can answer that one, I think. So we looked at other properties built around the same age, the same date, 1965, and we equalized. We brought the effective age down to bring them in line with other properties built around that time. That was for equalization purposes. And again, based on the 2023 inspections, the windows were original. So that was captured in the new effective age.
I hope that goes to sort of answer that question, Mr. Hoffman, in the sense that obviously there's a lot of subjectivity involved with the appraiser who's out there putting on that effective age. They are looking at that again with mass appraisal lens, if you will. So when they're looking at similar properties, they're looking to see, is this something that's representative of a 50-year-old property? And I think that's what they're trying to capture overall.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Lawson?
Yes, I guess this is for the owner. According to my calculations, the rent has gone up 0.38%. The total income has gone up 0.4%. And the totality, the NOI has gone up about 0.9%. When the rental income throughout Arlington has gone up 6.3%. Don't you think it's fair on the part of the county to assume an increase in the rents received?
So we apply Virginia law, which states that you must consider the actual income and expenses. What the county has done is projected income and expenses. So we look at the actual, and as the county will tell us over and over, these are annual assessments. So if the rent does go up, then it will be captured in the subsequent assessment. But before it does, it's not in accordance with Virginia law to speculate on income and expenses. So no, I do not think that's fair. We apply what the property actually did, and if it goes up, then it'll be captured in the following year.
But Jordan, let me ask you this. The apartment income is based upon the entire year. It's gone up 6.3% according to overall Arlington. So why would it be speculative to assume an increase in the rental income of a justifiable amount?
It would be speculative in this instance because a lot of that increase is tied to new supply coming online. As we're all aware, that new supply has generally been at the higher end of the rental income. So as that pulls renters there, there's limited availability to raise rents further at this lower end. To maintain occupancy, you're going to be drawing renters from below this level up. So they're already going to be paying higher expenses. It's the typical renter's not going to be somebody who's looking at brand new apartments right on top of the metro versus this 1965 build. The typical renter is going to be somebody coming up from maybe the Meyerton that we heard earlier and paying more to come here. So a lot of that increase, to answer your question briefly, is due to new supply coming online at the higher end of the market. So,
Now, I'll just add the lack of amenities at this property, both in the asset itself, and people are looking for amenitized properties, and the lack of amenities in the surrounding neighborhood. This is, in fact, as Jordan said earlier, a submarket within a submarket. You're in an area with a lot of, buildings that aren't being used, old buildings, and there really aren't any amenities at street level or within the asset itself.
Okay.
Mr.
Thank you.
Lawson, may
This
we
is
respond?
probably just to end this portion of it, but I mean, it's probably more for comments, but the rents would reflect that. And, I think, Mr. Harmon's comment that it's, wrong that they project, they have to project. In November, when they're doing this, they don't have what the actual income and expenses are until after the fact. So I think that's somewhat of an absurd statement, but moving
Madam
along
Chairwoman, may
to
we-
other questions.
Okay.
No? Okay, Ms. Shuttlesworth, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, again, so as we look at the 2023 INE, mostly we see positive trends. The rental income increased by almost 8%. Vacancy went down from 8% to 6.7%. Then NOI itself grew by 4.5%. Our projected OPEX are actually higher than the OPEX projected by the appellant. And I ask the board members to accept our revised 2024 assessment of $66,088,800. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
yes, thank you. So by law, once a property is appealed, we leave the realm of mass appraisal. We have to look at the specific property upon appeal. Now, hopefully that clarifies some of the statement about applying actual income and expenses, because once it's appealed, the county does have actual income and expenses. Those are what should be used. Now, here again, we've heard the county defend cap rates based on mass appraisal. We're moving into the realm of how does this 5.65% cap rate apply to this 1965 build? 5.65, that's 36 basis points above the PwC Q3 2023 survey for low end. That survey is institutional grade properties, brand new A+, A properties, the best amenities, the best locations. And this property, by the way, is a Class B property per CoStar. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's just among the board. Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, I'll share my thinking. I do think there are issues with the county's cap rate. However, I look at the 2023 assessment, 65,419,700. And then I look at what's being proposed by the county, 66,088,800, which is a very modest
Hi, Rachel.
increase.
This is Eileen Borman. If you
I'm
could
sorry.
give me a call back, I would greatly
Borman?
appreciate it. I apologize.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Lawson.
So I guess unless someone can provide an argument that that's indicates a lower value, I'm okay with where the county is.
Mr. Huffman?
I also think the cap rate's a little low, and I think going to a 1970 effective age puts it right in line with what the appellant's asking for. I think we're splitting hairs between 1970 and 1975. I don't really think there's a compelling case that you could prove that that something happened technologically in 74 that changes the type of building or whatever, right? It was built in 65. It's still got original windows. It's still got an outdated unit mix. Nothing major has been done other than just keeping up the property. So it seems arbitrary to just add 10 years to the effective date just to get to the next cap rate on the table.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll tell you what I did. I went through because, I do think, as I said, I think the lack of amenities, and the overall area there, I mean, the rents will reflect that. But, I think that the appellant did create an argument over the vacancy in collections. I mean, historically, it's been, higher than the 6%. And I did two things. I mean, I went as far as 8% on that. It brought down, not quite to where they wanted 64, 682, 7. But that got the actual number of the vacancy at 529, which, was slightly high. So then I went back and adjusted it to 7%, which put it at 463 for vacancy and collections. Brought down the assessment just slightly, 65,385,700. But interested in what other folks think. Mr. Mendez?
Yeah, I thought Mr. Lawson asked a great question about the rents and, how they were compared to the whole county. So with that, I'm okay with the county's revision.
Okay. Mr. Matzkin?
That's where I fall, just what Johnny said. This is almost a flat increase. And given the amount of products and the success in the last, since the primary ugliness of COVID has abated, putting this up a fraction of percent makes a lot of sense to me. Otherwise, we're splitting hairs on whether it should be 6 or 7% vacancy. I was very sensitive to that, but I think it's splitting hairs.
Okay, Mr. Yates, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I had noted the the vacancy or i.e. concessions just isn't there. But when I look at the EGI and then the NOI, the progression is, I think the county's reasonable. I don't think, I would be surprised if next year came in much higher than what they have.
Okay, Mr. Lawson?
Lower.
Yeah, I was just wondering, as a compromise, would it make sense, given that we have rents going up, but on the other hand, we have issues with this particular project, would it make sense to just leave it at what it was assessed last year?
That's effectively Mary's number.
Yeah, Mary's very close to that.
Yeah.
What issues you mean, Barnes?
Well, the
Offsetting issues.
vacancies, the fact that the building is older, because I asked the question, the rents have gone up all over the county. I don't know, is it 6.3% according to the county's numbers? And so, I asked that question, and yet they haven't gone up for this particular project to that extent.
At the
That's
time
why
of
I
it,
agreed with Johnny. They haven't gone
Mr.
up
Pe-
very much.
Oh, Mr. Penaranda?
Yeah, I did pretty much this, almost the same as you did, Mary. I didn't go as far as 7 because I thought the vacancy amount was just a little bit high. So I went to 6.5, but it's very minor adjustment that would result from that. I come up with 65,502,000, which is not very significant in my opinion. So I thought that the assessment, the proposed assessment would be okay with me. But I'm okay with the number that you came up at 7% also. If if there's any reduction that people want to make, but I'm okay with the proposed assessment.
All right, well, I think there's enough votes to do that then.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
somebody like to make a motion then?
I'll go ahead and move that we reduce the assessment to 66,088,800 based on the test column.
Okay, so. Okay, Mr. Matzkin is a second. All in favor?
All right.
Okay, and opposed? That would be Greg and myself. Only because I feel it should be lower. Not that I didn't want to do that. Okay, so the assessment is confirmed at the county's revised number of 66,088,800. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, do we have Ms. Roskin? And the appellant, Dravros,
Valetis.
Valetis?
Valetis. I know it was hard for me. Valetis.
Are they on, Rosa?
No, I never saw them log on.
All right, well, then moving to the next case on the agenda, RPC 29002015 at 3826 South Formal Run Drive. And I guess with the absence of the appellant, then Ms. Roskin for the county, please.
Thank you, board members. Basically, this is a typical warehouse. I believe the ceiling height in there is roughly probably 30 plus feet high. This is typical for the warehouses in that area, brick construction, and it does have some office spaces in support of that warehouse in the front portion of the building. So basically it's about 21,000 net leasable area. I did do an interior and exterior inspection of this property this year, back in April, with the owner. I also requested that they provide the 2021 through 2023 INEs, which they did so, as you can see in the summary page. And after reviewing this, looking at the 2023 INE, our original January 1 NOI is lower than what's being reported for their 2023. Well, I took it one step further and I ran a test. And effectively, the test still continues to support the original January 1 assessed value of $4,831,800. I'm open for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, questions from board members? None? Mr. Matzkin?
Very quickly, for the department, did you get any feedback other than the none that we have here from the appellant, where they think it ought to be 3 million or not your number? You got no input.
Well, I mean, I did walk around the site with the owner, and I don't wish to put. Basically, he just feels that in a roundabout way, they didn't like that the assessment increased.
That's best you can do. Thanks.
That's the best I can do. They provided no support for their value.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Hoffman?
The operating expenses you got on the test, that's from their INE worksheet? Or did you just come up with that as a kind of a historical operating range?
Are you talking about, okay, so you're asking of the test column F?
Yes.
Yeah, well, yes. When I looked at it, I thought, okay, what is a realistic test for expenses? And I used a percentage. That's generally speaking what I use for general commercial. And that's what it equated to, was the 30,
Okay.
the amount that you see before you.
It looks like their INEs have a higher number, but they've listed that under pass-throughs.
No.
Yeah. Maybe I'm looking at another year. You know what? I'm looking at the 21 INE. Okay. So this is older. This is the last time they submitted an INE.
2020 was the last time, but during the course of this appeal, they provided the last 3 years for me.
Okay. All right,
Okay,
thanks.
No final questions. All right, Ms. Roskin, do you have any final comments in your minute?
I just want to reiterate that our January 1 NOI is well supported with the most recent INE of 2023. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's just among the board. Difficult without any information from the appellant to support it. So, is everybody okay then? If I motion to
Yeah.
confirm, okay?
Yeah.
All right, then I will move to confirm the county at 4,831,800. Do I have a
Second.
Motion and a second by Mr. Lawson, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, okay, it's unanimous, the county is confirmed at 4,831,800. All right, the next case on the agenda is RPC 3100202G at 2659 Shirlington Road. Ms. Ruskin for the county, please.
Sure, just a moment, flipping through my. Yeah, okay. This once again is another warehouse in the Shirlington area, Design Cuisine. And this warehouse, once again, it has very high ceilings. It's got a brick construction. There are more office spaces on the second level for this building. They actually run a kitchen out of here also. It's an industrialized kitchen. It's not your standard kitchen for a restaurant, if you will. You know, someone who comes in, or even takeout. It's not that kind of a kitchen. Then they also have a couple of office spaces that they use for staging, meaning when clients come in, they stage their food and allow them to come in and you know, present the product and everything. Switching to my summary page, once again, I did inspect the interior and the exterior of this building. Also, there's a garage in the basement level, and it holds a fair number of parking spaces, about 30 plus parking spaces. And then there are also a number of parking spaces on the outside for any large trucks that are coming and going. Once again, they supplied the last 3 years of income and expense statements for this property in the appeal. And when you look at the January 1 original NOI, it's much lower than what's being reported for the 2023. Therefore, I ran a test just to make sure, hey, are we realistic? And once again, the test column F continues to support the original January 1 assessment. I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? No? Any final comments, Ms. Ruskin?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. All right, that's again, just among the board. I mean, I again, same reason, no additional information. In fact, I think Ms. Ruskin was generous when she said that the information provided for the current year supports it. I think it's under-assessed, you know, based on the performance. So I'm fine with the assessment.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's pretty rare, high quality M1 zone property, very hard to come by in Arlington. So if anything, I think this would trade at a much lower cap rate than what's imputed here.
Okay, anybody different? All right,
No.
then I will move to confirm the county at 13,387,900. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Lawson, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Okay, it's unanimous. The county's confirmed at the 13,387,900. And the final case on the agenda is RPC 3100305G at 2565 Shirlington Road. Ms. Ruskin, again for the county, please.
Okay, apologize. You're going fast for me. Let's see, go to my remarks. Okay, once again, this is another warehouse in the Shirlington area, much larger. There are basically two tenants in this property, DC Rental, which is Design Cuisine, and also the U.S. Postal Service. And I did get to go inside this property and inspect the entire interior and exterior. It's your typical brick construction, very high ceilings, 30 to 40 feet high, and they have a number of little office spaces scattered throughout as a support to the warehouse. Moving on to the summary page. Okay, and it's 98,000, has over 98,000 net leasable area. Once again, the last 3 years of income and expense statements were supplied for this appeal. And our January 1 assessment, our January 1 NOI is lower than what's being reported for the 2023. And so I ran a test, and once again, the test continues to support the original January 1 value. I'm open for questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from board members? No? Okay, any final comments, Ms. Ruskin?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right, I'm assuming, I don't like to speak for everyone, but I believe that we've got the same rationale from the last two cases, specifically the immediate case. If anything, it's probably underassessed, but I think we should confirm the county.
Yep.
So no
Agreed.
objection. All right, then I will move to confirm the county. Do I have a second?
Second.
I like keeping it consistent, Mr. Lawson. There you go. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
I opposed. Okay, it's unanimous. County's confirmed at 24,356,500.
Thank you,
Thank
board.
you. Okay, that completes the agenda. Does anybody have any other business? No? Okay, then we will stand adjourned at 10:28. Reconvene tomorrow in person, June 26th at 9 a.m. and that room change, because a room change to 311. So we're good on that. And then I would just